I walked into the supermarket on a Tuesday morning like any other retired woman, and by the time I reached the cereal aisle, 43 years of carefully constructed stability were about to collapse. The man standing there, reading the back of a granola box with reading glasses perched on his nose, was someone I'd promised myself I would never see again. Someone I'd buried so deep in my memory that even my husband's name on our wedding certificate felt more real than what we'd once been. But the universe doesn't care about the deals you make with yourself at 21. And now, at 64, I was about to learn that some chapters don't close just because you stop reading them. My cart literally stopped moving. I stood there, frozen, while a woman with 2 screaming toddlers maneuvered around me with an annoyed sigh. He hadn't seen me yet. He was thinner than I remembered, his hair completely silver now. But the way he tilted his head when he concentrated, that slight furrow between his eyebrows, it was exactly the same. My hand started shaking on the cart handle. I had 2 choices: turn around, leave my half-filled cart right there, and walk out. Or keep moving forward, pretend I didn't recognize him, grab my oatmeal, and go. What I should not have done, what every rational part of my brain was screaming at me not to do, was stand there long enough for him to look up. And he did. His eyes met mine, and I watched 43 years collapse in his expression. The granola box slipped from his fingers, hit the floor with a crash that sent oats scattering across the linoleum. Neither of us moved to pick it up. A store employee appeared from nowhere, asking if everything was okay, and I heard my own voice, distant and strange, saying yes, everything's fine. But nothing was fine. Because the way he was looking at me, the way his mouth formed my name without sound, I knew he'd been carrying the same weight I had. And that weight had just found its way back to both of us. If you're watching this thinking you know where this goes, let me stop you right there. Because what happened next wasn't some romantic reunion. It was so much more complicated, so much more devastating than that. Hit subscribe, because by the end of this, you're going to understand why I'm still terrified to check my phone. Let me take you back. Not to Tuesday, but to 1981. I was 21 years old, working my first real job as a receptionist at a manufacturing company in Cleveland. Richard was 34, recently divorced, the kind of man who wore his wedding ring tan line like a wound. He was the production manager, and I was supposed to be temporary, just filling in for someone on maternity leave. We started with coffee, innocent conversations in the break room about nothing, weather and weekend plans, and complaints about the coffee itself. Then those conversations got longer, stayed later, became the thing I looked forward to more than anything else in my day. I knew it was dangerous. I knew he was older, that he'd just come out of something that destroyed him, that I was playing with something I didn't understand. But when you're 21, you think you can control fire if you're careful enough. You think the rules that break other people somehow won't apply to you. By September, we weren't just talking anymore. We were staying after everyone left, sitting in his office with the door closed, sharing things we'd never told anyone. He talked about his ex-wife, how she'd left him for his brother, how he came home one day and half the furniture was gone. I told him about my father, how he'd walked out when I was 9 and I'd spent my whole childhood thinking it was somehow my fault. We weren't touching yet, but we were doing something maybe more intimate. We were letting each other in. The first time he kissed me, it was late October, in the parking lot after everyone else had gone home. I'd stayed to help him finish inventory reports, and when we walked out into the cold, he just stopped, turned to me, and said, "I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." I should have said no. I should have gone to my car, driven home to my apartment, called my best friend and told her I needed to quit. Instead, I kissed him back. And in that moment, I felt something I'd never felt before. Like I mattered. Like I was someone's entire world. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that his ex-wife was pregnant, and the baby wasn't his brother's. For 3 months, we existed in this bubble. We were careful, never at work where anyone could see. He'd pick me up 2 blocks from my apartment. We'd drive to diners in other towns, sit in corner booths, hold hands under the table like teenagers. He told me he was falling in love with me. I told myself I was falling in love with him, but really, I was falling in love with how he made me feel. Seen. Chosen. Important. Then Christmas came. He told me he had to spend it with family, that his parents were elderly and traditional, that it would raise questions if he didn't show up. I said I understood. I spent Christmas Eve with my roommate's family, smiling through dinner while my heart was somewhere else entirely. He called me at midnight from a gas station payphone, told me he missed me, told me he couldn't wait to see me, told me this would be our last Christmas apart. 3 days after New Year's, his ex-wife showed up at the office, 7 months pregnant, crying in the lobby, begging to talk to him. I watched from my desk as he came out, as his face went completely white, as he ushered her into his office and closed the door. They were in there for 2 hours. When she left, she was still crying, but differently. Almost hopefully. He didn't come back out to talk to me. He just grabbed his coat and left. He didn't call that night. Or the next. On the 3rd day, I drove to his apartment. I knew I shouldn't, that I was crossing every boundary we'd set, but I needed to understand. His car was there, but when I knocked, he didn't answer. I stood in that hallway for 15 minutes, knocking, calling his name, until a neighbor opened their door and told me to keep it down. I left a note, drove home, cried until I couldn't breathe. He called a week later, asked if we could meet. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. We met at the same diner, the same corner booth, but everything was different. He looked like he hadn't slept. He held my hands across the table and told me his ex-wife was pregnant, that she wanted to try again, that his family was pressuring him to do the right thing, that he had to think about the baby. And then he said the thing that destroyed me. He said, "You're so young. You have your whole life ahead of you. You'll forget about me." As if love was something you could just schedule out of your calendar. As if I hadn't rearranged my entire world around him. I told him I understood. I told him to do what he needed to do. I did not tell him that I went home and threw up for 3 hours straight. I did not tell him that I couldn't eat for a week, that my roommate threatened to take me to the hospital because I looked like a ghost. I didn't tell him any of that because I wanted him to remember me as strong, as someone who could handle it. Even though I was shattering into pieces so small I didn't think I'd ever be whole again. And here's what I've never told anyone. Not my husband, not my daughters, not my closest friends. I was pregnant too. 6 weeks. I'd found out 3 days before his ex-wife showed up. I was going to tell him that night at dinner. I had the whole thing planned, this cute way of breaking the news. But then she appeared, and suddenly my news didn't matter anymore. I never told him. I scheduled an appointment at a clinic 2 towns over, and I went alone. Made the choice alone. Carried it alone. Because what was I supposed to do? Trap him? Destroy his chance at doing the right thing? I was 21 years old, and I thought I was being mature. I thought I was being selfless. Really, I was just terrified. I left the company 2 weeks later, told them I got a better opportunity, moved to Columbus, started over, buried everything that happened in Cleveland so deep I convinced myself it was someone else's life. I met David 6 months later. He was safe, stable, kind, a high school teacher with no drama, no ex-wife, no complications. We dated for a year, got married, had 2 daughters, built a normal, quiet life in the suburbs. I loved him. I did. But I loved him the way you love something that saves you, not the way you love something that consumes you. And for 43 years, that was enough. It had to be enough. David retired last year. Lung cancer took him 4 months later. The doctor said it was aggressive, that there was nothing we could have done differently. But I still wonder if the stress I brought into our marriage, the part of me I could never fully give him, somehow contributed. I know that's not how cancer works, but grief doesn't follow logic. I've spent the last 8 months in our house, sorting through 50 years of accumulated life, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not someone's wife or someone's mother. My daughters live across the country. They call twice a week, tell me I should travel, join a book club, try online dating. They mean well. They don't understand that I'm not lonely for company. I'm lonely for a version of myself I lost before they were born. And then Tuesday happened. Richard, the supermarket, the granola box on the floor. We stood there for what felt like an hour but was probably 30 seconds. Finally, he bent down, picked up the box, and said, "Catherine, just my name." like a question and an answer at the same time. I said, "Hi, Richard." And then, because apparently my brain decided to completely malfunction, I said, "You look good." He laughed. This short, disbelieving laugh said, "You're lying, but thank you." Then, quieter. "You look exactly the same." I should have said it was good to see him and walked away. Should have grabbed my oatmeal, checked out, driven home, and never thought about it again. Instead, I heard myself say, "Do you want to get coffee?" He hesitated. I could see him running through the same calculations I was. All the reasons this was a bad idea. All the ways this could go wrong. Then he nodded. Said, "There's a place around the corner. I'll meet you there?" I said yes. Left my cart right there in the aisle. Walked out to my car with my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Sat in the driver's seat asking myself what I was doing. This man was part of a life I deliberately left behind. Seeing him again couldn't possibly lead anywhere good. But I started the car anyway. Drove to the coffee shop, parked, walked inside. He was already there, sitting at a table by the window. 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He remembered how I took it. Cream, no sugar. That small detail, that he'd carried that forward through 4 decades, made me want to cry. I sat down across from him. We just looked at each other for a minute. Then he said, "I've thought about you every single day for 43 years. And I knew I was in trouble, because I'd thought about him too. Maybe not every day, but often enough that it felt like a betrayal of the life I'd built. Often enough that I'd trained myself to shut it down the moment it started, to redirect my thoughts to something safer. But now he was sitting across from me, saying the thing I'd sometimes wondered late at night but never let myself believe, that I hadn't been alone in carrying this. We talked for 3 hours. Not about that year, not at first. We caught up. The surface stuff. He told me about his life, how he'd remarried his ex, how they had the baby, a son, how they stayed together for 18 years before divorcing again, how his son was grown now, living in Seattle with 2 kids of his own, how he'd remarried a 3rd time, to a woman named Susan, and how that lasted 7 years before she left him for, and this made him laugh bitterly, his accountant. How he'd been single for the last 10 years, how he'd retired from manufacturing and now did woodworking in his garage, how he lived alone in a small house 3 miles from where we were sitting. I told him about David, about my daughters, Emma and Sophie, about my grandchildren, about David's cancer, the funeral, the strange silence of a house that's too big when it's just you, about how my daughters want me to move closer to them, but I can't seem to make myself do it, about how I've been feeling lost in a way I haven't felt since I was 21. He reached across the table and took my hand. Said, "I'm sorry about David. He was lucky to have you." And I started crying. Right there in this coffee shop, tears just streaming down my face, because nobody had said that to me. At the funeral, people said David was a good man. They said I'd been a good wife. They said I must be so strong. But nobody said he was lucky to have me. Nobody acknowledged that I'd given something, that I'd been something worth having. Richard didn't let go of my hand. He just sat there holding it while I cried. When I finally stopped, when I'd wiped my face with the napkin he handed me, he said, "Can I see you again?" And every sane part of me knew I should say no. I should thank him for the coffee, say it was nice catching up, and leave. But I said yes. Because I'm 64 years old. My husband is dead. My children are grown. And I'm tired of doing the sensible thing. We've been seeing each other for 3 weeks now. Not dating, exactly. Just meeting. Coffee shops, diners, a walk around the park near his house. We talk about everything. Our lives, our regrets, the people we became after we left each other. He's told me things about his marriages, about how he could never fully commit because he was always comparing everyone to a 21-year-old girl in Cleveland. I've told him about the pregnancy, about the choice I made alone, about how I've carried the guilt of it every single day, wondering if I robbed him of something he deserved to know. He cried when I told him, held my face in his hands and said, "You were so young. You shouldn't have had to do that alone." And here's the part that makes this so much more complicated. I'm starting to feel things I haven't felt in decades. Things I thought were dead. that I'd convinced myself were just the foolishness of youth. But they're not dead. They're just buried. And being with him is like excavating a part of myself I thought was gone forever. I laugh more. I think about things besides doctor's appointments and grocery lists. I feel like a person again, not just a role. But yesterday, something happened that's made me question everything. My daughter Emma called, said she's coming to visit next month, that she wants to help me sort through Dad's things, that maybe we can talk about me relocating. And while she was talking, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Just something simple, asking if I wanted to meet for dinner. But Emma heard the buzz, asked who was texting me, and I lied. I said it was the pharmacy about a prescription refill. She believed me. Why wouldn't she? I've never been the kind of person who lies. But I am now. Because how do I explain to my daughters that I'm seeing someone? And not just someone, but someone from before their father. Someone who represents a version of me they've never known. They'd think I'm disrespecting David's memory. They'd think I'm moving on too fast. They'd be right. David's only been gone 8 months. I should still be grieving. I should still be wearing my wedding ring, which I took off last week and put in a drawer. I should be a lot of things I'm not. And here's what keeps me up at night. I don't know if what I'm feeling for Richard is real, or if I'm just trying to reclaim something I lost when I was too young to fight for it. I don't know if I'm honoring David's memory by finally being honest about what I need, or if I'm betraying everything we built together. I don't know if 64 is too old to start over, or if it's exactly the right time because I finally understand what matters. I don't know anything anymore except that for the first time in decades, I feel awake. Richard asked me yesterday if I'd be willing to take a trip with him. Nothing far, just a weekend cabin upstate. He said we could just talk, spend real time together away from the coffee shops and the worry about being seen. And I want to say yes. God, I want to say yes so badly. But I'm terrified. Of what it means. Of what my daughters would think if they found out. Of what I'm becoming. Of the fact that I'm 64 years old and I feel like I'm 21 again, making the same dangerous choices, walking toward the same fire. I haven't given him an answer yet. He said to take my time, that he's not going anywhere. But I know that's not entirely true. At our age, time is the one thing we don't have unlimited amounts of. Every day we wait is a day we don't get back. And maybe that's what makes this so urgent. The feeling that this might be the last chance either of us has to get it right. So I'm asking you, whoever's watching this, what would you do? If you had a chance to reclaim something you thought you'd lost forever, something that came with complications and judgment and risk, would you take it? Or would you choose safety? Would you honor what was or reach for what could be? Because I genuinely don't know. And Emma arrives in 4 weeks, and Richard is waiting for an answer. And I'm standing at a crossroads I never thought I'd face again. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. I know this isn't the kind of story with easy answers. I wish it was. I wish I could tell you everything worked out perfectly, that I made all the right choices and nobody got hurt. But I can't, because I'm still living it. I'm still deciding. And whatever happens next will change everything. Leave a comment and tell me what you think. I'll be reading every single one. And maybe if enough of you weigh in, I'll come back and tell you what I decided. What happened when Emma came. Whether I said yes to Richard, whether I'm brave enough to choose myself this time, or whether I let it slip away again, for the second and final time in my life. Hit subscribe if you want to know how this ends. Because honestly, so do I.